And real doesn't need to be perfect to be strong. That truth stayed with me longer than I expected. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't arrive like a revelation. It just settled in quietly, the way morning light does when you don't notice it until the whole room is already bright. A week later, I was back at the hospital, standing outside Trauma Bay 2, watching a new resident struggle through her first major case presentation. Her hands were shaking just slightly, her voice trying to sound confident but not quite landing there yet. I recognized that version of myself immediately. Not the skill level. The feeling. The constant need to prove you belonged in a room that never quite felt like it was yours. After she finished, there was a pause. The attending beside me started to speak, but I stepped forward first. "Walk me through your thinking again," I said, not unkindly. She blinked, surprised. Then she did. Slower this time. More careful. More honest. When she finished, I nodded once. "You missed a variable," I said. "But your reasoning was solid. Fix that. And you're there." Her shoulders dropped just a little. Relief. "Thank you," she said. And in that moment, something clicked in me. I wasn't that invisible girl anymore. I wasn't even the version of me who had something to prove. I was someone who could steady someone else. That shift, it mattered more than any title. Later that day, Maggie found me in the hallway. "You handled that well," she said. "She reminded me of me," I replied. Maggie smirked slightly. Terrifying thought. I laughed under my breath. "She'll be fine," I added. Maggie studied me for a second longer than usual. "You're different," she said. "Good different or concerning different?" "Settled," she answered. "That's rare in this job." I didn't respond right away, because she was right. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying something unfinished inside me. Not completely gone, but no longer controlling everything. That evening, when I got home, the house smelled like garlic and butter. Nathan was in the kitchen again, music playing low, hippo positioned strategically for maximum food opportunity. "You're early," he said, glancing at me. "Miracles happen," I replied, setting my bag down. He handed me a spoon. "Taste this." I did. "Needs salt," I said. He nodded. That's what I thought. We moved around each other easily. The kind of rhythm that doesn't need to be discussed. After dinner, we sat at the table longer than usual. Not talking. Just being there. Eventually, Nathan said, "Your mom texted." I looked up. "About what?" "She asked if you're free next Sunday. Something about your grandmother." My chest tightened slightly. Not panic. Just awareness. "Nana?" I asked. He nodded. "She wants to see you." I leaned back in my chair, thinking. My grandmother had called me once after everything came out. That conversation had been brief, emotional, unfinished. This would be different. "I'll go," I said. Nathan didn't ask if I was sure. He just said, "Okay." Sunday came colder than expected. The kind of cold that makes everything feel sharper. When we arrived, my parents' house looked the same. Of course it did. That was the strange thing about returning to places that held so much history. They rarely changed. "You did." My mother opened the door, softer this time, less rushed. "She's in the living room," she said quietly. I nodded and walked in. My grandmother sat in her usual chair by the window, a blanket over her lap, hands folded in a way that felt smaller than I remembered. But her eyes, still sharp, still seeing everything. "Irene," she said. I stepped closer. "Hi, Nana." She held out her hand. I took it. Her grip was light, but steady. "Come here," she said. I sat beside her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You look like your mother did at your age." I smiled faintly. "I'm not sure how she feels about that." Your grandmother huffed softly. "She'll survive." That made me laugh. And just like that, the tension shifted. Not gone, but softened. "I was wrong," she said suddenly. Direct. No cushioning. I believed what I was told because it was easier than asking questions. I looked at her. 89 years old. Still choosing honesty. "That matters," I said quietly. She nodded once. "It should have happened sooner." "Yes," I agreed. But it didn't. She squeezed my hand slightly. "And yet, here you are." Here I am, I echoed. We talked for a while after that. About simple things. Hair garden. My work. Nathan, who she assessed within 3 minutes and declared, "Good choice." At one point, she leaned back and studied me. "You didn't come back the same," she said. "No," I replied. "Good," she said. "The old version of you let people decide too much." I didn't argue. Because she wasn't wrong. Before we left, she said something that stayed with me longer than anything else that day. "Forgiveness," she said, "is not about giving someone a clean slate. It's about deciding how much space they get in your life now." I thought about that all the way home, because that's exactly what I had been doing. Not forgetting. Not erasing. Just redefining. That night, as I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Same face. Same person. But not the same weight behind the eyes. I turned off the light and walked back into the bedroom. Nathan looked up from his book. "You okay?" he asked. I slipped under the covers. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." He reached over, laced his fingers through mine. "No more questions. No need. Because sometimes, healing doesn't look like a big moment. Sometimes, it looks like this. Quiet. Steady. Real. And if you've stayed with me this far, if any part of this story feels familiar to you, I want to hear from you. Not because there's one right answer, but because there are so many ways people carry family, distance, forgiveness, and truth. Share your thoughts, your experiences, or even just where you are right now in your own journey. It helps more than you think, not just for me, but for everyone reading along. And if something in this story moved you, even a little, stay with me. There's more ahead, and I promise, it goes deeper than you expect. Because sometimes the hardest part isn't losing your family. It's learning what to do when they finally come back. And that is where everything truly begins. And that is where everything truly begins. Not with a reunion. Not with an apology. But with what comes after both of those things. When the emotions settle and real life quietly steps back in. Because forgiveness, I've learned, is not a single moment. It's a series of decisions you make again and again, especially on the days when it would be easier not to. A few days after visiting my grandmother, I was back in the operating room. Long case, complicated. The kind that requires everything you have and still asks for more. When I finally stepped out, peeling off my gloves, there was a message waiting. From my father. Just 3 words. "Are you free?" That was new. No instructions. No assumptions. Just a question. I stared at the screen longer than I expected. 5 years ago, I would have answered immediately, not out of calm, but out of need. Now, I thought about it. Not whether I should respond, but how. I typed slowly. "What do you need?" A minute passed. Then 2. Then my phone buzzed. "Can we talk?" I leaned back against the locker room bench, exhaling softly. This was it. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just a conversation that should have happened years ago. "I can call in an hour," I replied. "Okay," he sent back. No pressure. No follow-up. Just, "Okay." An hour later, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot, engine off, phone in my hand. I pressed call. He picked up on the second ring. "Hi," he said. His voice sounded different. Quieter. "Hi," I answered. There was a pause. Then he said, "I don't really know how to do this. Honest. Uncomfortable. Real." "That's fine," I said. "Neither do I." Another pause. Then, slowly, he began. "I've been thinking about everything," he said. "Not just the last 5 years. Before that too." I didn't interrupt. "I keep going back to moments," he continued. "Small ones. Things I didn't think mattered at the time. Like the science fair. The missed conversations. The assumptions. I thought being a good father meant providing, setting rules, keeping things in order," he said. "I didn't realize I was also supposed to listen." That landed. Because it was true. "I should have asked you," he added. "Even once. Just once. That would have changed everything." I looked out through the windshield, the sky already turning darker. "Yes," I said quietly. "It would have." Silence again. But not empty this time. Full. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. I don't expect you to forgive me quickly. I blinked slightly. I don't even expect you to trust me, he added. Not yet. I shifted in my seat, surprised by the clarity in his voice. But I want to earn that chance, he finished. Not demand. Not assume. Earn. That word mattered. You don't earn it with words, I said. I know, he replied immediately. Then how? I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. By showing up, he said finally. Consistently. Even when it's uncomfortable. Even when I don't get anything back right away. I closed my eyes for a second. Because that was the answer. That's a start, I said. We didn't fix everything in that call. We didn't even try. We talked for 20 minutes. About simple things. Work. Weather. The kind of conversation people take for granted. And when we hung up, I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt steady. Like something had shifted, not dramatically, but meaningfully. That weekend, he did exactly what he said he would. He showed up. Not at my house. Not unannounced. He texted first. Are you home? I can stop by for 10 minutes if that's okay. 10 minutes. Boundaries respected. I looked at Nathan. He raised an eyebrow slightly. Your call, he said. I nodded. 10 minutes is fine, I replied. When my father arrived, he didn't step inside right away. He stood at the door, hands in his pockets. Hi, he said. He held up a small paper bag. I brought those muffins you used to like. I almost smiled. Almost. Come in, I said. He stepped inside carefully, like he wasn't sure what he was allowed to touch. Nathan came over, greeted him calmly, shook his hand. No tension. Just quiet acknowledgement. We sat at the table. He didn't try to fill the silence. Didn't rush. Didn't overcompensate. That, more than anything, told me he was trying. After a few minutes, he said, I remember you used to stay up late studying. I used to think you were overdoing it. I glanced at him. And now? He looked at his hands. I think you were building something I didn't understand. I didn't respond right away. Because there was nothing to argue with. That's fair, I said. He nodded. We talked a little more. Then, exactly 10 minutes later, he stood up. I said 10 minutes, he said. I'll go. I looked at him. You can stay a bit longer, I said. Not because I had to. Because I chose to. He hesitated. Are you sure? Yes. He sat back down. And that moment, small as it was, mattered more than anything loud or dramatic ever could. Because trust doesn't come back all at once. It returns in inches. Later that night, after he left, Nathan leaned against the counter. Well? He asked. I thought about it. He didn't try to rewrite anything, I said. That's good. He didn't defend himself either. That's better. I nodded. He just stayed present. Nathan smiled slightly. That's how it starts. It was. Not perfectly. Not completely. But honestly, and honesty, is something you can build on. Over the next few weeks, that pattern continued. Short visits. Simple conversation. No pressure. No pretending. My mother, in her own way, did the same. She started sending messages. Not long ones. Not emotional ones. Just consistent. I saw something that reminded me of you. I made too much soup. Can I drop some off? Thinking of you today. Each one small. Each one real. And Monica. She stayed quieter. Which, for her, was the biggest change of all. One afternoon, she texted. Can we talk? I stared at the message. Then replied. Coffee, Thursday. Neutral ground. Clear boundary. When Thursday came, she was already there. No performance. No dramatic opening. Just waiting. I sat down across from her. She took a breath. I've been going to therapy, she said. I know, I replied. She nodded. I'm starting to understand why I did what I did. I didn't interrupt. I was afraid of disappearing, she admitted. And instead of dealing with that, I made you disappear. There it was. The truth. Ugly. Clear. I can't undo it, she said. But I don't want to be that person anymore. I studied her. Not her words. Her tone. Her posture. Her eyes. No calculation. No performance. Just uncertainty. What does that look like? I asked. She swallowed. Not lying, she said, even when it costs me something. Not controlling how people see me, letting them decide. That was new. Painfully new. Then do that, I said. She nodded. I will. We didn't hug. We didn't reconcile in that moment. We just sat there. Two people who shared a past, trying to figure out what the future could look like. And that was enough. For now, because healing isn't about rushing to the ending. It's about staying present in the middle. And if you've made it this far, I want to pause for a moment. If you've ever been in a situation where trust was broken and slowly rebuilt, or where family became something complicated instead of simple, share your perspective. There's no perfect answer here, and hearing different experiences helps more than you think. And if this story is speaking to you, stay with me. Because what comes next isn't about conflict. It's about something even harder. Learning how to live with a past that didn't break you, but definitely changed you. Because the truth is, rebuilding a relationship is one thing. Learning how to exist peacefully inside it again, that's something else entirely. That's something else entirely. Because peace doesn't arrive just because the truth is out. It has to be practiced, quietly, repeatedly, especially in moments no one else sees. A few weeks after that coffee with Monica, life didn't suddenly become lighter. It became steadier. And steady, I've learned, can feel unfamiliar when you've spent years bracing for impact. One afternoon, I was charting notes between cases when my phone lit up again. A group message this time. My mother, my father, Monica, and me. That was new. Thinking about Thanksgiving, my mom wrote. Would you be open to coming over this year? I stared at the screen. Thanksgiving. The day that used to feel like a scoreboard I never won. I didn't answer immediately. Not out of avoidance, but because I needed to feel what my answer actually was. A few minutes later, Monica replied first. I'll understand if you're not ready. Another change. No pressure. No emotional cornering. Just space. I typed slowly. I'm open to it, but I'd like to keep it small. My dad responded this time. Small is good. That was it. No expectations attached. No hidden meaning. Just agreement. And somehow, that made it heavier in a different way. Because now, it was real. The days leading up to Thanksgiving were surprisingly quiet. No overplanning, no constant check-ins. Just a simple message the night before from my mom. We'll be here. Come when you're ready. When you're ready. Those words stayed with me. The next day, I stood in my kitchen, staring at the counter longer than necessary. Nathan leaned against the doorway, watching me without interrupting. You can change your mind, he said gently. I shook my head. I don't want to, I replied. He nodded. Then we go. The drive felt different from the last few visits. Not tense, but aware. Like stepping into a place that used to belong to you, but you're not entirely sure how it fits anymore. When we arrived, the house was warm, lights on, the smell of food already filling the air. My mom opened the door, softer than before. Hi, she said. Hey. She stepped aside. Come in. Inside. Everything looked familiar, but not frozen. Just continuing. My dad was setting the table. Monica was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. For a second, I stood there, taking it in. Not comparing, not measuring, just noticing. Hey, Monica said, glancing over her shoulder. Hey. Nathan greeted everyone easily, grounding the room in a way I didn't have to think about. We settled in slowly. No big moment. No dramatic pause. Just movement. At one point, my mom handed me a dish. Can you put this out? She asked. I took it. Sure. Simple. Normal. And somehow, that hit harder than anything else. Dinner wasn't perfect. There were pauses, moments where someone almost said something and stopped. But no one rushed to fill the silence. No one forced anything. That restraint, it mattered. Halfway through the meal, my dad looked at me. Irene, he said. I looked up. Yes? He hesitated, just for a second. Then continued. I remember a Thanksgiving. You were in 8th grade, I think. You brought something you made for that science fair. My chest tightened slightly. I do, I said. He nodded. I didn't really look at it. No defense. No excuse. Just the fact. I should have, he added quietly. The table went still. Not uncomfortable. Just present. I would have liked that, I said. He nodded again. I know. And we moved on. That was the pattern now. Acknowledgement, not dwelling, not avoiding. Just letting truth exist without trying to reshape it. After dinner, we cleared the table together. At some point, my mom ended up next to me at the sink again. I used to think keeping things peaceful was the same as keeping things right, she said softly. Irinse da plate. It's not, I replied. No, she agreed. It's not. She didn't cry this time, didn't collapse into regret. She just stood there, understanding something she hadn't before. And that felt more real than any apology. Later, we moved into the living room. Coffee. Dessert. The kind of slow evening that doesn't need direction. At one point, my dad turned on an old lamp in the corner. That light's been broken for years, I said automatically. He smiled slightly. I fixed it last week. I looked at it. Small thing, but intentional. You're fixing a lot of things lately, I said. He met my eyes. I'm trying to. I held his gaze for a second. I can see that. And I meant it. Monica stayed quieter through most of the evening. But when she spoke, she didn't overcompensate. Didn't perform. Just contributed. At one point, she told a story from work. Not to impress. Not to dominate. Just to share. And no one interrupted her. No one gave her the spotlight either. It was balanced. Finally, when it was time to leave, no one made a big deal out of it. No, stay longer. No emotional pull. Just my mom walking us to the door. Thank you for coming, she said. Thank you for inviting us, I replied. She hesitated, then added, we can do this again, when you're ready. I nodded. We'll see. Not a promise. Not a rejection. Just honest. On the drive home, Nathan was quiet for a while. Then he said, that was different. I nodded. Yeah. In a good way? I thought about it. Then said, in a real way. He smiled. I'll take real. Me too, I said. When we got home, I didn't feel drained. I didn't feel like I had to recover. I just felt present. And that was new. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling for a while. Thinking. Not about what had gone wrong. Not about what could have been. Just about what was. A family that wasn't the same. But wasn't broken in the same way anymore either. Something rebuilt. Not perfectly aligned, but standing. And I realized something then. Closure doesn't always look like a clean ending. Sometimes it looks like a continuation you didn't expect to want. If you've been following this story, I want to pause here for a second. If you've ever had to rebuild something you thought was gone forever, or sit at a table that once hurt you and choose to stay anyway, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Not because there's a right answer, but because these moments mean different things to different people. And if this part resonated with you, stay with me. Because what comes next isn't about whether we can sit at the same table. It's about something even deeper. What happens when you finally stop looking at your family through the past and start seeing them as they are now? That shift doesn't happen all at once. It happens in quiet moments, the kind you almost miss if you're not paying attention. A few days after Thanksgiving, my mother called again. Not about a visit, not about plans, just to talk. I found an old photo album, she said. From when you were little. I leaned against the kitchen counter, phone pressed to my ear. Okay, I said. I was wondering if you'd want to look through it together sometime. There was hesitation in her voice. Not fear of rejection, respect. I took a breath. I can come by next week, I said. She exhaled softly, like she hadn't expected a yes so easily. I'd like that. When I arrived, the house felt calmer. Not because anything big had changed, but because no one was trying to control the atmosphere anymore. The album was already on the table. My mom didn't open it right away. She waited. For me. I sat down and placed my hand on the cover. Let's see, I said. Page by page, we moved through a version of my life I hadn't thought about in years. Birthday parties, school photos, random moments I didn't even remember. At one point, I stopped. There was a picture of me holding a small science project, standing awkwardly in the corner of the kitchen. I looked at it for a long second. "I remember this," I said quietly. My mom followed my gaze. "I wasn't there," she said. "It wasn't a question." "No," I replied. She nodded, eyes fixed on the photo. "I told myself you didn't mind." I turned the page slowly. "I did," I said. Not accusing, just true. She swallowed. "I know that now." We kept going. Not every page needed commentary. Some memories stayed silent. Others didn't. At the end of the album, there was a blank space. A few empty plastic sleeves. My mom touched one of them lightly. "We stopped adding to it," she said. I looked at her. "Then maybe it's time to start again," I said. Her eyes lifted to mine, surprised. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "Yes, but we do it differently." "How?" she asked. "No pretending," I said. "No skipping over things because they're uncomfortable. We put in what's real." She nodded slowly. "I can do that." That afternoon didn't fix the past, but it reframed it. We weren't erasing what had been missing. We were acknowledging it and choosing what came next. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. I got a call from the hospital administration. "Dr. Hewlett, we'd like you to speak at a community event," they said. "About resilience. Your story." I almost declined. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because telling it publicly meant owning it in a different way. That night, I brought it up to Nathan. "They want me to speak," I said. He looked up from his laptop. "Do you want to?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Why not?" I sat down across from him. "Because it's not just my story," I said. "It involves them." He nodded. "Then don't tell it as their story," he said. "Tell it as yours." That stayed with me. So I said yes. The event was small. A local community center. Folding chairs, simple stage, people who came not for spectacle, but for something real. When I stood up there, looking out at a room full of strangers, I didn't start with the dramatic parts. I started with something simpler. "I used to think being seen meant being chosen," I said. The room quieted. "But I've learned, being seen starts with how you see yourself." I talked about distance, about silence, about building a life without waiting for permission. And then, carefully, I talked about what happens when the past comes back. "Reconnection isn't a reward," I said. "It's a responsibility, for everyone involved." I didn't name names. I didn't tell every detail. But I told the truth. When I finished, there wasn't immediate applause, just stillness. Then, slowly, people started clapping. Not loudly, but sincerely. Afterward, a woman came up to me, probably in her late 40s. "I haven't spoken to my sister in 10 years, she said. I nodded. "I don't know if I ever will," she added. "That's okay," I said. She looked surprised. "It is?" "Yes," I replied. "Reconnection isn't always the right answer, but understanding, that's always worth something." She smiled slightly. "Thank you," she said. Moments like that reminded me why stories matter. Not because they solve things, but because they make people feel less alone in what they're carrying. When I got home that night, Nathan was waiting. "How did it go?" he asked. I set my bag down. "It felt honest," I said. "That's the best kind," he replied. I smiled. "It is." A few days later, my dad brought something over. No warning. Just a knock at the door. When I opened it, he held up a small wooden box. "I found this in the garage," he said. Inside were old papers, certificates, awards, things I had forgotten existed, things he had kept, but never shown. "I didn't know how to talk about these before," he said. I looked at him. "And now? I don't want to hide them anymore." I ran my fingers over one of the papers. "You kept all of this?" He nodded. "I just didn't do anything with it." That felt familiar. Caring, but not expressing it. "I would have liked to see this," I said. "I know," he replied. There was no defense, just understanding. We sat down and went through the box together, piece by piece. Not to rewrite history, but to see it fully, as it was. Later that evening, after he left, I placed a few of those papers in the new album. Not as proof, not as compensation, but as acknowledgement. They existed. So did I. And that mattered. Time kept moving. Work stayed demanding. Life stayed full. But something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for approval. Not for recognition. Not even for closure. Because I had built something that didn't depend on those things. And that gave me a kind of peace I didn't know I could have. One night, sitting on the porch again, I said to Nathan, I don't feel like I'm missing something anymore. He looked at me. Good, he said. I thought about it. It doesn't mean everything is fixed, I added. It doesn't have to be, he replied. I nodded, because that was the truth. Some things stay imperfect. Some relationships never become what they could have been. But they can still become something meaningful, something real. And real is enough. If you've been with me through this story, I want to thank you, not just for listening, but for feeling it. If parts of this journey reflect something in your own life, I'd really value hearing your perspective. What would you have done? What are you still holding on to? Your voice matters here. And if this story gave you something clarity, comfort, even just a moment to reflect, stay with me. There's always another layer, another truth, another story waiting to be told. Because in the end, this isn't just about family. It's about identity. It's about boundaries. It's about choosing who you become, no matter where you started. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's this. The truth doesn't just set you free. It teaches you how to live honestly, quietly, and on your own terms. And sometimes, that's the strongest kind of freedom there is. And sometimes, that kind of freedom is quiet enough that no one else notices it, but strong enough that it changes everything inside you. I didn't wake up one day feeling healed. That's not how it works. Not for me, at least. It was more like one morning I reached for my phone and realized I wasn't hoping to see a missed call from them anymore. And that realization didn't hurt. It didn't sting. It just was like a scar you forget is there until someone asks about it. Life didn't pause after that. It kept moving the way it always does. Steady and indifferent. Surgeries, long nights, coffee going cold on my desk, Nathan reminding me to eat when I forgot, Hippo resting his head on my knee like he understood more than most people ever tried to, and somewhere in the middle of all of that, my family slowly, carefully, started becoming part of my life again. Not the center of it, not the foundation, but a part. And that difference mattered more than I can explain. A few weeks after the photo album day, my mother sent me a message that looked simple on the surface but carried something heavier underneath. She wrote, I made your favorite soup today. The one you used to ask for when you were studying late, do you remember? And I stared at that message longer than I should have, because I did remember. I remembered sitting at that same kitchen table years ago, textbooks spread out, highlighter in my hand, waiting for her to notice I was still there, waiting for her to ask if I needed anything. And sometimes she did, but not always, not enough. And now here she was, years later, remembering something I thought she had forgotten. Or maybe something she had never really seen clearly until now. I didn't respond right away, not because I didn't want to, but because I've learned that my silence now isn't fear, it's choice. And when I finally replied, it was simple, I remember, and a few seconds later she sent, can I bring some over? And I looked at Nathan. He didn't say anything, just gave me that small nod he always gives when he trusts me to know what I need, and I typed, yes, that's okay. When she arrived, she didn't walk in like she used to, no rushing, no filling the space with nervous words. She stood at the door for half a second like she was checking if she was still allowed to be there, and I stepped aside and said, come in. And that moment, that tiny shift, said more than any apology ever could. We sat at the table, the same kind of table, but not the same history, and she placed the container in front of me like it was something fragile, like she was afraid it might be rejected, and I opened it. The smell was exactly the same, and for a second, just 1 second, I was 18 again, sitting under a kitchen light that felt too bright, trying to be seen, but then it passed. Because I'm not that girl anymore, and she's not the same woman either. We didn't talk about the past right away. We talked about small things, work, weather, the neighbor's dog that apparently barks at everything, and then, In the middle of a pause that didn't feel forced, she said quietly, "I didn't know how to see you back then." And I looked at her, really looked this time, not as a daughter waiting, but as a person listening. And I said, "I know." And that could have been the end of it, but she continued, "I thought if you were quiet, you were okay. I thought if you didn't ask, you didn't need." And I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, because that was it. That was the whole misunderstanding wrapped in one sentence. "I needed you to ask," I said. She nodded, slowly, like the weight of that was settling in. "I should have." There was no argument, no defense, no trying to soften the truth, just acceptance. And that was new. After she left, I stood in the kitchen for a while, the empty container still on the table, the house quiet again, and Nathan came up behind me, rested his hand lightly on my back, not asking, not analyzing, just there. And I said, "She's trying," and he replied, "I know," and that was enough. Days turned into weeks, and the pattern stayed the same. Small efforts, consistent, not perfect, but real. My father calling sometimes just to ask how my day was, not to advise, not to correct, just to listen. And I could hear the difference in his voice, the pauses where he used to interrupt, the moments where he chose not to. And one evening, he said something that stayed with me. He said, "I used to think being right was more important than being close," and I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so accurate, it hurt, and I said, "Yeah, I noticed." And he didn't get defensive, he just said, "I'm trying to learn something different now." And I believed him, not completely, not blindly, but enough. Monica was the slowest change, and maybe that made sense. Some damage takes longer to understand, let alone repair. We met again. Same coffee shop, same table, but a different energy, less tension, more honesty. And she didn't start with an explanation this time. She said, "I'm not going to try to justify anything," and I nodded, because that was a good place to begin. And then she said something that I think she had been avoiding even in therapy. "I didn't just lie because I was jealous. I lied because I was afraid that if you became something bigger, I would become nothing." And that sentence sat between us like something heavy and undeniable. And I didn't rush to respond, because some truths need space to exist before you react to them. "You didn't become nothing," I said eventually. "I know that now," she replied. "But I didn't then." And there it was. Not an excuse, not a defense, just context. And context doesn't erase damage, but it helps you understand where it came from, and understanding makes it easier to decide what to do next. "I don't hate you," I told her. Her eyes lifted, surprised. "You don't?" "No," I said. "But that doesn't mean everything is okay." She nodded, and for once, she didn't try to push past that boundary, she just accepted it. And that's when I realized something I hadn't put into words before. Forgiveness isn't about restoring what was, it's about deciding what can exist now, and what can't, and being honest about both. If you're still here listening, I want to say something to you, not as a storyteller, but as someone who has lived through something messy and imperfect. If you've ever been the one who wasn't heard, or the one who spoke too late, or even the one who made a mistake you can't undo, I see you, and I want to know what you think. What would you have done in my place? What would you do now? Share it. Not because there's a right answer, but because your story matters too. And it might help someone else feel less alone in theirs. Because what comes next isn't about proving anything anymore. It's about living with what's been revealed. And choosing, every single day, what you carry forward, and what you finally let go. And what you finally let go isn't always the anger first, like people think. It's usually the expectation, the quiet, persistent hope that one day everything will rewind and play out the way it should have. Because the truth is, it won't. There is no version of my life where my parents show up at my graduation, or sit in the front row at my wedding, or hold my hand the night I thought I might break under the weight of everything. Those moments are gone. And accepting that wasn't a single decision, it was something I had to relearn over and over again, in small, almost invisible ways, like when my mother called one afternoon and asked what my schedule looked like next month, and for a split second I almost said, "Why?" with that old edge in my voice, that reflex that had been built from years of disappointment. But I stopped myself, not to pretend, not to erase the past, but because I realized she wasn't asking to control anything. She was asking because she wanted to show up this time, and that difference mattered. We planned something simple, nothing dramatic, just a Sunday lunch at my house, the kind of thing families do all the time without thinking about it. But for us, it felt like stepping onto unfamiliar ground, like learning how to walk together again without knowing exactly where to place our feet. I cleaned more than necessary that morning, not because the house needed it, but because my mind needed something to focus on. Nathan noticed. Of course he did. He always does. And he just smiled and said, "You know they're not coming to inspect the place, right?" And I exhaled, a small laugh escaping before I could stop it. "I know," I said. "I just want it to feel right." And he nodded, understanding without asking for more. When they arrived, it wasn't awkward in the way I had expected. It was quieter than that, like everyone was aware of the space between us, but no one was trying to fill it too quickly. My father brought flowers, something he had never done before, not even for my mother, and he stood there holding them like he wasn't entirely sure what the protocol was, and I took them, said thank you, and that small exchange felt like something significant, even if it looked ordinary from the outside. We sat at the table, 4 plates again. That number has started to mean something to me now, not as a symbol of what was lost, but as a reminder of what is being rebuilt, piece by piece. And the conversation moved slowly at first. Careful, measured, but then it shifted, not dramatically, just enough that it felt natural. My mother asked Nathan about his work. My father listened, instead of interrupting, really listened, and I found myself watching them. Not with suspicion, not with guarded distance, but with a kind of cautious curiosity, like I was getting to know them as people, not just as parents. At one point, my father looked at me and said, "Your aunt told us about the award," and I knew which one he meant, and there was something in his tone that I couldn't quite place at first. Not pride exactly, not regret alone, something more complicated, something that didn't fit neatly into a single word, and I nodded. "Yeah, it was a good night," I said, keeping it simple, and he cleared his throat, a habit I've seen my whole life. "I would have liked to be there," he added. And for a second the room felt very still, because that sentence carried everything he hadn't said for years. "I know," I replied, and I meant it, not as an accusation, not as a reminder of what he missed, but as an acknowledgement of what we both understood now. Lunch ended, without any dramatic moment. No big speeches, no tears, just a quiet sense that something had shifted again, slightly, but undeniably, and after they left, I sat on the couch, with Hippo curled up beside me, his steady breathing grounding in a way that words never could. And I thought about how different this all felt from the version of reconciliation I used to imagine. It's not cinematic, it's not clean, it's not even satisfying in the way people expect. It's slow, uneven, sometimes frustrating, but it's real, and maybe that's better. Monica called me later that week, not for anything specific, just to talk, and that alone would have been unthinkable a few months ago. And the conversation wasn't perfect. There were pauses, moments where neither of us knew what to say. But there was also honesty, not polished, not rehearsed, just honest. And at one point she said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about showing it over time," and I leaned back in my chair, listening. "I don't know how long it will take," she continued, "but I'm not going anywhere this time," and I didn't respond right away, not because I doubted her, but because I've learned that belief doesn't have to be immediate to be real. "We'll see," I said finally, and that wasn't cold, it wasn't dismissive, it was simply the truth. And maybe that's the biggest change in all of this. I don't feel the need to rush to resolution anymore. I don't feel the pressure to forgive on a timeline, or to rebuild something just because it looks good from the outside. I've built a life that stands on its own, a life that doesn't collapse if someone walks away from it, and that gives me the freedom to choose who stays, and how, and on what terms. If you've been listening this far, really listening, then you probably understand that this isn't a story about revenge or even about justice in the way we usually think about it. It's about something quieter, something harder to explain. It's about learning how to stand on your own and still leaving the door open just enough for the people who are willing to meet you where you are, not where they expect you to be. So I want to ask you something, not as a prompt, but as a real question. What would it take for you to open that door again? And just as important, What would it take for you to keep it closed? Think about that. Because the answer isn't the same for everyone, and it shouldn't be. As for me, I'm still figuring it out. One conversation, one visit, one quiet moment at a time, and maybe that's okay. Maybe not having a perfect ending doesn't mean the story is unfinished. Maybe it just means it's still alive. Because at the end of the day, family isn't just something you're born into. It's something that's built, sometimes broken, and if you're willing, slowly rebuilt again. Not the same as before, but sometimes something stronger. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that becoming someone you're proud of doesn't erase the past, but it changes how much power that past has over you, and that might be the closest thing to freedom we ever get. Take care of yourself, take care of the people who show up for you, and if you can, be the kind of person who shows up for others too, because in the end, that's what stays, that's what matters, and that's what makes a life feel whole.